Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really plunging into the rich heritage of Buddhism in Thailand, focusing on the 20th century.
It's a fascinating topic.
Absolutely. And we've waded through a lot of sources to, pull out the key insights for you. Consider this your shortcut to understanding a real cornerstone of Thai culture.
It really is foundational, isn't it? More than just religion. It's woven into the fabric of society. As the state religion, its influence touches, well, pretty much everyone among the 65 million population, apart from some specific minorities, obviously. It's got incredibly deep roots.
Right. So our mission today on this deep dive, we want to trace how Buddhism first got to Thailand, look at the major historical sites, explore the key leaders.
Its cultural impact, which is huge.
Huge. And preservation efforts, plus, the modern challenges and where things might be heading.
There should be some interesting aha moments along the way.
Definitely. We'll try not to overwhelm you. Let's dive right in at the beginning.
Yeah.
How did Buddhism first arrive in Thailand?
Okay, so we need to go way back. Around the 3rd century BC.
Yeah, that far back.
Yeah. Our sources point to Emperor Asoka in India. He was, a massive figure in spreading Buddhism. He sent out missionaries.
Right, I've heard of him.
And one key person for Thailand was a nobleman, Sonomahatha. His journey apparently followed the Sothapana River down to the Mon Kingdom and this land they called Suvarnabhumi, the Golden Land.
Suvarnabhumi. Okay, so that's the southern influence from India. But I saw something about a northern route, too.
Yes, good point. Around the same sort of period, give or take, maybe 3rd to 5th century BC, there was another arrival of Buddhist ideas from the north, from China.
From China. Interesting.
Led by an arahant, a respected hermit named Pramantrai Surathera.
An arahant, that's an enlightened being, right?
Exactly, someone who's reached the highest level. And interestingly, this Pramantrai Surathera is said to have later become the first king of the Suvarnabhumi kingdom.
So spiritual and political leadership combined right from the start.
It seems so. Shows how intertwined things were even back then.
And it wasn't just those two main paths, was it? What about the Aizen region? Northeast Thailand.
Right. Aizen had its own connections. It absorbed influences from northeast India, the Makkada kingdom specifically, and also from the Khmer civilization.
Ah, the Khmer. That brings in Mahayana Buddhism, doesn't it?
Precisely. Early on, the Khmer influence was more Mahayana. So what you're seeing is not one single arrival, but more like a confluence, a mixing of different Buddhist traditions.
Fascinating, like different streams flowing together.
Kind of, yeah.
And out of all this, Theravada Buddhism eventually became dominant.
That's right. Especially during the key kingdoms like Sukhothai and Ayutthaya. That's when Theravada, the school of the elders, focusing on the Buddha's original teachings, really cemented its place.
And that lineage carries through to today.
Absolutely. It's the foundation of Buddhism in modern Thailand.
Okay. Let's jump forward then to the 20th century, our main focus. This was a period of huge change for Thailand. How did that impact Buddhism?
Oh, massively. The 20th century brought enormous transformation. Politically, you had major upheavals. The coups in 1932 and 1947 are key moments.
Right, the shift from absolute monarchy
towards parliamentary democracy, exactly. Though it wasn't always a smooth path, and, different political groups sometimes tried to use Buddhism for their own ends to gain support.
Politics and religion, always a complex mix. What about other changes? Social shifts?
Big time. Huge migration from rural areas, especially the Central Plains, into Bangkok. People looking for work, for opportunities.
So massive urbanization.
Yeah, the city just exploded in size. Plus, you had more exposure to Western culture films, radio, later TV, cassette tapes.
Globalization starting to creep in.
Pretty much. And all this rapid urban development, new roads, infrastructure, it put pressure on things.
How did that affect the Wats, the temples?
Well, sometimes the city's growth literally outpaced the temples. Traditional building rules might get amended. Sometimes religious sites even had to be relocated.
That must have been disruptive.
It could be. But despite all that, the overall Buddhist population kept growing. And interestingly, the 20th century is also when we start seeing Thai Buddhism spread internationally.
Oh, really? Where did it start showing up?
The sources mention temples being set up for the Cambodian refugee community in Rhode Island, USA in the early 80s.
Ah.
And then in 83, you have the Bhavana Society founded. That was a Sri Lankan monk and a white American lay meditator. So signals of growing Western interest in Theravada.
Right, the seeds were being sown. Okay, that gives us great context. Let's turn to the physical legacy now, the major Buddhist sites. Our sources treat them almost like individual stories.
They really are. Each one tells a part of Thailand's story, reflects different eras, different styles, and they're not just buildings.
Let's start with the big one. Wat Phra Kaew, the Temple of the Emerald Buddha, described as the most revered, the most important. Why is it so central?
Well, it's seen as the ultimate symbol of Thailand itself. The faith, the artistry. The Emerald Buddha statue isn't just beautiful, it's considered the sacred protector of the monarchy, of the whole nation.
Its image is everywhere in Thailand, isn't it?
Absolutely everywhere. It signifies that deep connection.
And where exactly is it?
Right in the heart of Bangkok, the City of Angels along the Chao Phraya River. You usually get there via Rajadamnon Avenue. And it's actually inside the Grand Palace complex as part of that larger site.
Okay, and when you go in, what hits you first, visually?
Oh, the gold. Definitely the huge golden chedi, that dome-shaped stupa. It's stunning, surrounded by smaller ones.
Maybe.
And they say it houses relics of really important monks, so that's a major pilgrimage spot, too.
And those big guardian figures.
The yakshas, yeah, these giant, colorful, mythical guardians at the base of the main chedi. They're very imposing, very majestic. The level of intricate art everywhere is just breathtaking.
Sounds overwhelming, in a good way. What's the atmosphere like?
It's quite something. You often hear traditional Thai music playing, maybe the soft chanting of monks. And the walls, they're covered in these incredibly detailed murals telling the story of the Ramakeen.
The Thai version of the Ramayana.
Exactly. Gods, demons, landscapes.
Right.
All in these brilliant colors. It's a whole visual narrative.
And I read about the cleaning, using only bamboo tools. That sounds unique.
It is. It's this deep-rooted tradition. To keep the temple pristine, especially during the rains, they have daily cleaning, and the rule is only bamboo tools.
Why bamboo?
It's passed down through generations. Each worker brings their own set, shaped by use. It's a real sign of devotion, you know? A connection between the people and the sacred space. Shows how much they care for Wat Phra Kaew.
That's incredible. Such dedication. Okay, let's move to Wat Pho, another major one. First-class royal temple, oldest in Bangkok.
That's right. Its older name was Wat Phra Chetapon. King Rama, I started it, Rama II finished it, and then Rama III did major renovations and expansions.
And it's huge, right?
The biggest temple grounds in Thailand, over 80 acres. Massive.
And it has a connection to an older site at Ayutthaya.
It does. It was actually built on the site of an older shrine at Wat Phra Kun Chau, which was Thonburi's city pillar shrine. The design was inspired by a temple in Ayutthaya, but the river, the Chao Phraya, changed course, so they had to move it. When Bangkok became the capital under Rama II, this site was chosen. They even copied the murals from the original temple.
Preserving the history. Smart. What did King Rama III add?
He added that big brick wall that surrounds it, now largest in the country. And inside, just tons of stucco work, glazed ceramic decorations, statues, stupas. It's incredibly ornate.
Very decorated.
Very. And those windows from his era still have their original design.
But Wat Pho wasn't just about worship, was it? It had this role in education and medicine, too.
Absolutely key. It was Siam's first public education center, taught everything from literature to traditional Thai medicine.
Like what kind of medicine?
Both Unani and Nuset medicine were taught there. And they had these things called corporeal fountains, basically statues showing therapeutic exercises linked to specific medical treatments. People came from all over to learn from the monks.
So it was a real hub for learning and healing, not just religion. Amazing. Okay, next up. Wat Arun, the Temple of Dawn, developed significantly by King Rama I, King Mongkut.
Yes. 1851, King Mongkut really transformed it, made it much more elaborate than its older Ayutthaya style. He brought in Chinese and Western influences architecturally.
Giving it that distinct look.
Exactly. It stands out. It needed some renovation later. The colors faded a bit, but the core design is from his time.
And the style's often called Neo-Gothic.
Yeah, that's a common description for the main prang, the spire. It's very tall, very ornate, covered in bits of broken-colored porcelain, gives it this shimmering look.
Must be stunning.
And climbing those steep steps, the view of the river and the city is just incredible, worth the effort.
The name Temple of Dawn. It's beautiful. What's the story behind it?
It comes from the Hindu god Aruna, the charioteer of the sun god Surya, associated with the dawn. Symbolically, it represents, well, a new beginning, a rebirth or rejuvenation of Buddhist traditions back then.
The dawning of a new era.
Kind of, yeah. The main pagoda, Phra Prang Wat Arun, is often seen as representing the rising sun. And seeing the actual sunrise or sunset against those spires with the palaces nearby, it's visually spectacular. Really spiritual.
Sounds breathtaking. Okay, lastly for the major sites. Wat Mahan thought. It grew as a study center, but then faced tragedy.
Yes. It's northeast of the Grand Palace, built under Rama I, finished under Rama III. It was important, overseen by the Supreme Patriarch, the head of the monastic community, the Sangha.
Right.
And in the 19th century, it really blossomed as a center for Buddhist studies, a place for modern learning, intellectual discussion.
But this intellectual energy caused some friction.
It seems so. Even though things looked smooth on the surface, this new thinking about modernism, social structures, education being discussed by students and some teachers, it created some tension with the more traditional monastic powers, a subtle undercurrent of change.
And then came July 26, 1947. What happened? Sounds quite serious.
It was deeply tragic. It was a very unstable political time. The education minister made these serious but ultimately unproven accusations against the priest-teachers at Wat Mahathat.
Accusations of what?
Fomenting rebellion, trying to seize the Supreme Patriarch position, things like that. And these accusations, sadly, led to violence right inside the temple. 26 members of the church council and monks thought to have progressive views were killed.
That's horrifying. Within the temple walls.
Yes. And the temple's abbot, a very learned monk, was arrested, tortured, and then forced into exile. A really dark chapter.
What happened to the abbot after exile?
Even in exile, he remained influential. People still sought him out. He actually planned to establish a new temple, Wat Mahatha Diwaram, and was even thinking about using television, which was emerging then, to preach the Dhamma, the teachings overseas.
Wow, even planning ahead with new technology.
Okay.
The ACS sites really paint a picture. Let's shift to the people now, the influential Buddhist leaders who shaped things in the 20th century. Thailand is known as a Buddhist nation, overwhelmingly Theravada.
Absolutely. Over 86% Theravada Buddhist. So the leaders, their teachings, their guidance, it's had a massive impact. And the sources say contemporary monastic groups largely follow the doctrines passed down by these figures.
The abbot of Wat Buania Vihara comes up as particularly influential. What was his impact?
His influence was vast, reached monks and lay Buddhists not just in Thailand, but internationally. He was really key in shaping modern monastic rules and establishing the standardized Theravada education system you see in Thai temples globally now.
Was he known for his specific meditation style, like Zen?
Interestingly, no. Despite being hugely revered for over 50 years, he wasn't linked to one specific tradition like that. He was seen more as a monk for all people. He knew everything: Pali scriptures, history, education, rituals, politics, art, and was apparently a brilliant speaker.
A real polymath monk. Then there's another figure, a meditation master known for practical wisdom. What was his approach?
This master, rooted in the Theravada tradition, became incredibly respected for teachings that were easy to apply in daily life. They resonated with many, including, significantly, Western monks.
How did he teach?
His style focused on that practical wisdom. He tended to avoid getting bogged down in complex Pali texts or commentaries. He let the Dhamma speak for itself, through direct experience. Simple but profound. He had a huge impact on how Buddhist philosophy and psychology were understood and practiced in the forest tradition. Very beloved figure.
And the late abbot of Wat Phra Krang. He was important for spreading Thai Buddhism abroad.
Very much so. He's noted as the first monk from that golden age of the forest tradition to practice asceticism overseas. He was instrumental in establishing the Saga Nikaya, a specific monastic lineage of the Thai tradition in the U.S.
Even with other traditions already there.
Yeah, he carved out a space. He preserved and spread that particular lineage, impacting many monks, nuns, and lay people in America. His teachings often included daily meditation, chanting, merit-making, built a strong foundation.
Okay, let's look closer at two giants. Somdet Phra Nyanasamvara and Ajahn Chah. Somdet Phra Nyanasamvara became the Supreme Patriarch. Tell us about him.
Born in Bangkok, 1913, a very long and influential life. Became a novice monk at 13, got the name Nyanasamvara. Abundant insight. He actually left monastic life briefly for more education, then reordained.
And eventually reached the very top.
The 19th Supreme Patriarch. And maybe most notably, he was the main spiritual advisor, the guru monk to King Bhumibol Adulyadej for an incredible 69 years.
Wow, 69 years.
Yeah. He was involved in royal rituals, promoted Dhamma study and meditation, cared for monks and the public, earned the title the Great Scholar of the Buddhist World. He represented Thailand internationally too, passed away in 2017, aged 104, a huge figure.
Truly significant. And then Ajahn Chah. A contemporary, but a very different path, deep in the forest tradition.
Very different, yes.
That.
Born in Ubon Ratchathani, 1918, studied traditionally first, then trained intensely under Phra Janman, really mastering the forest tradition's focus on insight meditation.
Was his approach immediately accepted?
Not entirely. His rigorous practice focusing on tranquility and clear awareness met some initial resistance, but it gradually gained acceptance and spread even to Bangkok.
And the Western connection.
That was pivotal. His first Western disciples arrived in 1966. That started a really important ongoing cultural exchange. He founded the International Forest Monastic Foundation in 1977, and his students have set up monasteries all over the world.
So his influence is global now.
Absolutely. Millions attended his funeral. His legacy is about simple living, deep insight, and how Buddhism can adapt and thrive in different cultures. Still very relevant.
Amazing reach. Lastly, briefly, for Panyanand, important in the far south.
Yes, for Panyanand, or for Phra Krukun. He led Wat Lam Phak Bia from 1939 to 1999. It's near the Malay border, so it became a kind of transit point for Malays wanting to ordain as Buddhist monks.
Did he face challenges?
There were attempts by authorities to disrupt the temple, but it stayed strong, partly due to connections in Bangkok and many followers. He was known for being able to connect with various political factions, quite pragmatic, though personally detached from politics.
And his background?
Quite humble, son of a fisherman from the Sea Gypsy community. He'd already gained prominence and wealth for another temple, Wat Phra Khao Thong, before moving south.
Okay, these leaders really illustrate the diversity within Thai Buddhism. Now let's zoom out again to Buddhism and Thai culture, this inseparable bond. Even with religious diversity, the culture seems deeply Buddhist.
It really is. You see the history and the influences, Mon, Khmer, Lao elements in the architecture, the rituals, how Buddha images are depicted. It adds layers. And ever since the 13th century, with Buddhism and the Pali language coming from Sri Lanka, the impact on art, literature, everything, it's been profound.
And the role of patronage, wealthy families in the 19th century.
Definitely. The nobility, the rich aristocrats, they funded major monuments, statues. Many landmarks we see today came from that era. But the sources also mention less obvious things like royal sculpture designs, amulet making, which is huge, even the visual language in mass-produced texts.
Even fakes are mentioned as a kind of art form.
Sort of, yeah. Reflecting popular belief and demand. It's complex. And there's apparently a need for more research on the everyday art practices in villages, which are often deeply tied to local Buddhist beliefs.
And the Ramakien mural at Wat Phra Yu getting UN recognition highlights the global significance.
Exactly. UNESCO calling it an international memory of the world really shows its value. But beyond the famous murals, there's this untold wealth, as the sources put it, of Buddhist craft applications like sculptural origami, fairground art for temple festivals, lots still to explore and appreciate.
Let's talk specifics. Festivals and rituals. With over 40,000 temples, they must be central to community life.
Absolutely central. Since the Sukhothai era, temples have been crucial socioeconomically. They're sacred spaces, yes, but also social hubs. Think temple fairs, games, food, maybe even some traditional gambling. Plus, merit-making on holy days is a massive part of social life.
How many major festivals are there?
There are 6 main Buddhist holy days spread through the lunar year. Makabucha, Visakha, Asala Puja are particularly big for rituals and community gatherings. Then you have other major holidays like Songkran, New Year, and Loi Krathong, Festival of Lights, which also have strong Buddhist connections.
They sound like lively events.
Very much so. Joyful occasions. People go to their local temple, listen to sermons, do evening rituals like Sifra. The Vasa robe offering during the monks' rains retreat is another big community thing supporting the Sangha.
And the chanting often includes Khmer elements.
Yeah, and specific whispered pronunciations. It reflects those historical linguistic links. Overall, Thai traditions, religious, social, personal, they're all deeply tangled up with Buddhist beliefs.
What about art and architecture outside the temples? Did Buddhism influence that too?
During the reigns of Kings Rama V, VI, and VI, the modernization period, you saw Western styles adopted. Neoclassical, Neo-Renaissance, Gothic. You see it in buildings in Bangkok and other cities.
A mix of styles, then.
A real mix. You even got churches built in mock Indian styles and temples built consciously imitating older Ratanakosin styles. There's that unusual Kartop Pagoda and Municipal Moonkin blending Thai, Buddhist, and Christian elements.
It's a real fusion.
Yeah, but alongside that, traditional Thai golden and brick sculptures, wall art, That continued, often with a unique blend of tradition and modernity. You also see things like Pali inscriptions using newer Thai characters, multilingual inscriptions, reflecting wider education and the influence of newspapers spreading knowledge.
And Thai literature and philosophy, how deeply is Buddhism embedded there?
Completely intertwined. The sources say way of life, literature, philosophy, entertainment, it's all connected, often exploring universal themes through a Buddhist perspective. Thai literature goes back over 1,000 years. Oral and written.
How did it evolve?
Before 1945, you can see periods. Sukhothai Ayutthaya, the beginnings, translating Jataka tales, writing a Ramayana sequel. Ayodhya Thonburi, more flourishing, more prose and poetry, adapting classics. Then Ratanakosin, a turning point, more Western influence, new ideas about kingship and literature, but still drawing heavily on Buddhist philosophy and ethics.
It's so clear how pervasive it is. Let's look at Buddhism's broader societal role now, beyond just culture and direct religious practice.
Given that, maybe 95% or more identify as Buddhist, its role is inevitably huge. You have the official temple, sure, but also countless informal sacred spots, trees, stones, caves. Temples have been socioeconomic anchors for over 700 years.
How so?
They meet spiritual needs, coordinate charity, provide merit for the dead, but historically they were also key distribution points for goods to the needy. That role still pops up during disasters.
So community centers in many ways.
Exactly. Unifying places for merit-making, practice, but also socializing, recreation, especially during holy days, offers a break from daily worries. You really can't understand Thai life without understanding Buddhism.
Let's dig into education and monastic life within that societal role.
Well, the Thai monarchy has consistently supported Theravada Buddhism, which cemented its influence on politics, education, culture, daily life. Even going back, you see challenges like monks with Khmer backgrounds struggling with the Pali Canon in the 19th century highlights how central scripture study was.
And traditions focused on the canon persisted.
Yes, like the Tirukutta tradition. Despite diverse architectural influences across Thailand, the unifying factors often come back to shared Buddhist practices. Merit-making, belief in relic power, worshipping a shared pantheon, and crucially, the importance of education, often traditionally based in monasteries. The sources even suggest looking into Buddhist heritage technologies, practical knowledge developed within that context.
Interesting. What about social welfare and community service? How does Buddhism shape that?
The Buddhist approach to education aims for holistic development, spiritual, mental, social, economic, all based on Thai Buddhist values. The goal is a better life, social progress, peace, prosperity. There's an altruistic focus on communal well-being.
And monasteries play a direct role.
Historically, and often still today, they're centers for social services and charity. The Buddhist emphasis on sustainable behavior promotes responsibility. Mental wholesomeness, ethical conduct, sila, seen as key for personal peace and social harmony.
Are there specific practices related to this?
Key ceremonies like thada, giving alms to monks, cultivate good deeds. Thadathadin, the 8-day retreat often for women, fosters self-discipline for oneself and others. While urbanization and the state have changed how services are delivered, the core Buddhist idea of welfare as spiritual development through selfless assistance remains influential. State welfare might even be seen as addressing failures to uphold basic precepts. The ethical teachings offer real social benefits.
And the political influence. That seems complex.
Undeniably, Theravada Buddhism is a pillar of the nation, accepted by the people and the elite. The government oversees monasteries via the Sangha system, which naturally impacts politics.
How actively involved is Buddhism in politics?
It varies, sometimes direct participation, sometimes more passive acceptance of norms. But the impact is stronger when religion and politics align. Fundamentally, Theravada Buddhism provides a worldview explaining suffering and liberation, which resonates deeply.
Are specific governmental ideas traced back to Buddhism?
Historically, yes. Things like distinctions of royal blood, political legitimacy, the idea of a righteous ruler, Sthira Dhammaraja, the old Jao policy for local governance, justifications for capital punishment, the structure of public administration, the idea a leader should resign for moral failings, hierarchies in ministries, superior-inferior distinctions, even justifying defensive war to protect the nation and its values. These have all been linked to Theravada principles at various times.
It's incredibly far-reaching. Let's pivot slightly to Buddhist tourism. Thailand being the second major center after India must make it a huge draw.
Oh, absolutely. That ancient heritage spread across many provinces is actively promoted. Bangkok alone has countless incredible shrines. Wat Phra Kalu, the jewel of Thai architecture within the Grand Palace, is top of the list.
And Wat Pho.
Huge draw, too. Its history back to the 16th century, the big renovation in 1832, being the largest temple in Southeast Asia with that massive reclining Buddha and those murals. Plus, Wat Phra Kae has those unique 1782 stone inscriptions, unmatched globally, apparently, even though the temple itself is older, from 1685.
Is tourism just about seeing these famous sites now?
It seems to be evolving. There's a growing interest beyond just sightseeing. People are searching for understanding, peace, simpler ways of life, connecting with Gautama Buddha's actual teachings.
So experiencing the culture and philosophy more deeply.
Exactly. Tourists want to experience the long history, the heritage, the teachings, the culture. The prediction is that this kind of religious tourism is likely to increase worldwide, and Thailand is perfectly positioned.
What about specific pilgrimage sites within Thailand? Beyond the big Bangkok temples, where do Thai Buddhists go?
Well, the four main sites in India and Nepal Lumbini, Bodh Sarnath, Kusinara, are hugely important globally for Theravada Buddhists, and Thai communities have built monuments there, like in Lumbini, to attract Thai pilgrims. There's even a new Thai-style stupa in Bodh Gaya.
But most Thai Buddhists focus locally.
Often, yes. It's cheaper, easier to visit frequently. So local sacred places are really important, not just sites linked to royalty, but also those established by local communities.
What kinds of places?
It could be anything believed to have a connection to the Buddha, symbolically or directly. The invocation Namo Tassa shows that reverence. So a pilgrimage site is understood as a place where the Buddha touched the world, in a sense. It's more specific than just any sacred site.
What's the difference?
Pilgrimage sites are sacred spots tied to particular traditions or acts of devotion. You have primary sites linked to the Buddha's life, and secondary ones, smaller monuments, local constructions. These could be lotus ponds representing Lumbini, sand mounds for his ashes, spots he supposedly stepped on, even natural features like snakes seen as representing the earth's spirit.
Fascinating range. And cultural exchange. How does that fit in?
Thailand has a strong reputation as a hub for world Buddhist heritage, connecting with many countries. Within Thailand, Buddhism and Islam are both prominent. The country has these main cultural subdivisions, and major cities offer different flavors: Bangkok for trade culture, Chiang Mai for temples crafts, Songkhla in the south with its Muslim areas, diverse temples, unique food.
And they showcase this heritage.
Yeah, through 6 main aspects: temples, palaces, language, tradition, fine arts, festivals, food. They have these annual cultural exchange parades in different cities, showcasing one aspect, often inviting heads of state who bring their own heritage too.
Has that always gone smoothly?
Mostly. There are past issues linked to old territorial disputes, but most are settled now. Cambodia is still a bit sensitive, though.
Why Cambodia?
The shared identity around the Angkor temples. Both sides feel a strong connection and ownership, which makes cultural exchange sometimes problematic.
Understandable complexity. Finally, the economic impact of all this Buddhist tourism.
It's significant. Buddhist culture, temples, monks, meditation really appeals to tourists, especially from places like China. They visit Thailand, Vietnam, Sri Lanka for this. Research has even looked specifically at promoting Buddhist tourism to Chinese travelers in Sri Lanka.
So countries are actively developing this?
Yes, examining resources, diffusion of culture, tourism development. Sri Lanka, for example, made a strategic decision back in 2009 to boost tourism, including its Buddhist heritage, to earn foreign currency. Cultural tourism is travel driven by interest in heritage and traditions, and Buddhism is a massive part of that for many countries.
It's clear Buddhist heritage is a major asset, culturally, spiritually, economically. Which brings us to preservation. These ancient structures must face threats.
They definitely do. Storms, floods, even vibrations from traffic and construction, they take a toll. Many sites are in constant need of repair.
What's being done?
The Thai government, working with Buddhist clergy councils and the Ministry of Culture, has laws like the Temple Act of 1905 to protect national heritage. There have even been ideas floated about creating a special body to oversee ruins where the history is uncertain, maybe even declaring some sacred and off-limits for physical repair, focusing on spiritual preservation instead.
Has there been international interest in helping?
Yes, quite a bit. Foreign archaeologists see Thailand's potential as a custodian of world heritage. There have been frustrations sometimes, maybe delays on surveys like at Ayutthaya due to sovereignty concerns, which is understandable. But overall, international expertise and funding have been valuable.
And local capacity has grown.
Significantly. More funding for education means better facilities, and Thai archaeologists get training abroad. We see the results. Successful restorations like Phnom Rung Temple, which the king highlighted, careful reconstruction of hill tribe artifacts, restoring early Ratanakosin buildings with foreign help.
And formal conservation efforts go back quite a way.
To the late 19th century, actually, King Rama V made a big bequest that helped start an archaeological museum with relics from Ayutthaya's Wat Sot. International groups and Thailand's Department of Fine Arts have been key in reviving academic archaeology and setting up new sites.
So it's a continuous effort.
Very much so. Contemporary conservation often involves research projects with international partners. Training courses are vital. Academic and government bodies promote awareness. Professionals are actively involved, tailoring approaches to local needs. Getting Ayutthaya listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site was a huge success story, showing how local, national, and international efforts can come together.
Does this collaborative spirit extend beyond Thailand's borders?
It does. There was some criticism historically about preserving sites elsewhere. Interestingly, at a World Fellowship of Buddhists conference hosted by Thailand in 1965, they asked Bhutan to host the next one focused on safeguarding heritage. But then, in 1968, Thailand itself hosted the 9th conference, broadening the scope to preserve both local and world Buddhist heritage.
Thailand took the lead then.
Seemed that way. They set up committees, international relations, finance, publications, etc., and invited countries with major Buddhist heritage, explicitly mentioning Angkor Wat in Cambodia and Borobudur in Indonesia. Shows a commitment to the bigger picture.
That's really commendable. Okay, let's shift to the present and future. Contemporary challenges, opportunities. Wat Phra Dhammakaya often comes up as a modern example.
It's definitely a prominent one. Established in 1970, known for huge ordination ceremonies, meditation broadcasts via satellite, it's become incredibly wealthy, owns vast amounts of land, features very modern architecture.
Does it appeal to younger generations?
It seems to, yeah. The large-scale worship, the use of electronic media, it connects, but its mass meditation programs get mixed reactions from different generations. Interestingly, though, the scale of it, the visual aids, it kind of echoes some pre-modern Buddhist devotional practices in a way.
How are broader global changes affecting Thai Buddhism? Economics, politics, media.
They're having a huge impact. The rise of the middle class, more educated youth, the power of mass and social media, it's all reshaping the religious landscape. You see some monks and lay people getting more involved in social issues outside the temple walls, responding to these global shifts.
Is the traditional role of monks changing?
The idea of religion being only about morality dictated by a monastic elite seems to be fading somewhat, and people are reinterpreting non-theistic Theravada ideas through lenses like naturalism, individualism, egalitarianism, progressivism, seeing it as a path for both personal and social change.
Modernization and globalization seem like powerful forces here.
Immense. Thailand's integration to the global market, the internet, it's led to this rapid diversification. New sects, new cults popping up, often bypassing traditional approval processes.
Challenging the old structures.
Definitely. Challenges traditional influence, leads to new institutions. It's a huge task for scholars now just to map these changes. And you see Buddhism's popularity in the West, that's globalization too. Both Buddhism moving out of Asia and how it changes when it lands in new cultures, with Western converts becoming teachers themselves.
And how are young people engaging with Buddhism now? Is that changing too?
Significantly, yes. Over the last couple of decades, youth engagement has really evolved. It's not just about ordination anymore. You see volunteering, development work, using online platforms for outreach.
Are they questioning things more?
It seems so. More intellectually empowered youth are asking critical questions about social action. New youth-led projects are emerging, focused on learning and social consciousness based on Buddhist values. This engagement is becoming really important for Thailand's development.
How does it differ from traditional engagement?
While basic Buddhist values are still taught early, how youth connect is diversifying. Phra Phahamo identify 3 forms: temple visits, social activities, and associating with socially active Buddhists. But now there's a shift. Engagement isn't always tied directly to a temple. Globalization, Western education, online networks, they all played a role. It's a refined engagement responding to new realities. Interesting area for research, maybe in other cultures too.
The sources also give specific temple case studies. Can you touch on a few? They seem to offer local detail.
Right, they ground the bigger trends, like Wat Phra Mahath in Nakhon Si Thammarat, opened by a famous monk, has distinct plaster images, lacquer panels, historical links to royalty and military figures, even youth dressing as trees for Visakha Bucha.
Okay. What about Wat Phra Singh in Chiang Mai?
Founded mid-14th century, classic Lana style with Burmese touches, royal temple status, houses the big lion Buddha statue, intricate carvings. Hugely important for the old Lana kingdom, still a symbol of Chiang Mai. The Wiharn Laikam is stunning Lana art.
And Watsakit in Bangkok, the Golden Mount.
Dates back to Ayutthaya, established in the capital by Rama I. Had an unfinished stupa from Rama III, became prominent under Rama V, got its golden stupa under Rama X. It's considered a masterpiece of Siamese temple architecture, built on that man-made hill. Central for national celebrations, holds relics, murals depicting Buddha's past lives. Very unique design.
One more, Wat Ratchabophit, known for its style.
Yes, neoclassical Italian style. Built by King Chulalongkorn in 1864, has royal mausoleums. It's a fascinating hybrid Thai and Western architecture in its Utham Hall, terracotta plaques with Renaissance-style floral patterns. Houses an important Buddha image, too. Shows that blend of influences.
Comparing Thailand to other Buddhist nations must offer perspective, too.
It does. While Thailand revived its Buddhist culture strongly from the mid-20th century, others had different paths. You see Mahayana temples elsewhere with diverse styles, Cambodian, Vietnamese, Chinese influences, some even replicating Thai temples. They raise awareness, especially for Chinese tourists, though maybe sometimes the teachings get misused.
What about specific comparisons?
You see Chinese-style structures or old Suvarnabhumi ruins within Thailand itself, like Phetchaburi. Mahayana temples with Mon or Khmer styles survive in places like Kon Kin. There are even efforts to reconstruct older styles like Hofra Pon Temple. And the recent push for Buddhist cultural tourism involves cataloging these sites.
How does Sri Lanka compare?
Sri Lanka has a very long Theravada history, deeply tied to politics since the 1st century BC. It navigated South Indian influences, Tamil Hindu states, but Theravada endured. Then came colonialism. Portuguese and Dutch were destructive, tried conversion, messed with language. The British approach was different.
And Myanmar.
Turbulent history, LDC status, farming economy. Origins are a bit obscure, but writing arrived with Buddhist scriptures. Had periods of warring states, then British rule, which led to civil society and a Buddhist movement developing.
Tibet is quite distinct, isn't it?
Very unique. Vajrayana Buddhism, Gelug, and Nyingma sects. Was mysterious for a long time. Early explorers mapped it. The term Lamaism was used. It has its own hierarchy. The Gelug yellow hats were historically wealthy. Unique calendar, records in the Potala and Norbilinka. Its spread happened in stages. Then the Dalai Lama became world-famous mid-20th century. Still lots of interest in understanding Tibetan Buddhism.
So looking ahead, what's the future trajectory for Buddhism in Thailand?
It's completely tied up with social change and globalization. Thailand's identity is strongly Buddhist, but new trends, biotech, economic shifts, political changes are transforming things. Traditional categories are blurring.
Are there concerns?
Sure, concerns exist alongside the enduring value of Buddhism. It might take on new functions, wider acceptance might bring misunderstandings, but Buddhist meditation and philosophy could be seen more as a relevant mental science.
What might become more or less important?
Maybe less focus on how things were done, more on what and who matters. Big material displays or monetary exchanges might become less relevant. Perhaps more decentralized expression. Literature, drama, trust-based communities. Art might use more secular or psychological language, concrete imagery. Adapting Dharma stories for today, artists connecting with everyday entertainment. That seems important.
And reflecting on the 20th century overall.
It was defining for world Buddhism, and Thailand was a key player, building its heritage. As a Theravada center with monasticism linked to kingship, its heritage is vast relics, inscriptions, buildings, intangible stuff like chanting, folk games. That dual monarch Sangha system, the monastery hierarchy, it's significant. Many Thai sites could be world religious records.
What about the role of technology now, the internet?
That's huge. The Buddhist cyber world emerged this millennium. States, temples, individuals online. It transforms how Buddhism is public, how it spreads globally. We need to examine the possibilities and dangers quickly.
Can Buddhism and cyberspace coexist easily?
They do coexist, but it raises ethical questions about reform. Some talk about a digitized modality as a third reality. Buddhism continues with new media, but it creates contradictions. More internet users, Web 2.0. Buddhist groups proliferate online and offline. Buddhism is more visible, but traditional authority might feel anxious about wider, uncontrolled access to information.
This has been an incredibly rich and insightful deep dive. We've covered so much ground: history, sites, leaders, culture, society, tourism, preservation, and the modern currents shaping 20th century Thai Buddhism.
It's really clear, isn't it, how deeply Buddhism and Thai society are interwoven. And the dedication to preserving and promoting that heritage is ongoing.
Absolutely. And that leaves us, and you, with a final thought to ponder. Considering this dynamic we've seen in Thai Buddhism, this interplay of ancient tradition and rapid modernity, how might other ancient wisdom traditions continue to evolve and stay relevant in our increasingly connected, tech-driven world?
That's a great question to reflect on.
Something to think about. Maybe explore the sources further if you're interested. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.